welcome to this very special Davos dialogue. I'm Shereen, Bhan. This one gives me particular pleasure because I've been running a show called Young Turks, which turns 20 in June. It's the longest running show on startups and entrepreneurship. So it gives me great pleasure to bring on board in Davos some of India's hottest startups, as well as a minister who's been championing the cause of startups in the state of Telangana. So that's the context of why we put this panel together. Here's the important thing to note. Over the last 20 years, a lot has dramatically changed for the Indian startup ecosystem, particularly in the last 10 years and more so in the last 2 years. There's been a lot of press and a lot of headlines around India minting unicorns. Just this year, we've seen 40+ unicorns being minted, but that's not the real story. The real story is about the value creation, in my opinion, and not so much the valuation. So what does the startup story for India look like from here on, and why are they getting so much focus and attention here in Davos? Let me start by asking you, Nikhil, Kamath. You know, as I said, it's been a great 2 years as far as India's startup ecosystem is concerned. In many ways, an inflection point. We've seen significant amount of money coming in to all kinds of companies. But the mood has changed. It's a lot somber. VCs are writing out note after note advising founders on what to do and what not to do. The headlines scream, the party's over. Is it?
Well, I think nobody can truly predict the next cycle. I mean, even the next 6 months or a year. But the issues of today will definitely make the cost of capital significantly higher. Traditionally, to counter inflation, the only tool Federal Reserve Bank of India has ever had is to make money supply tighter, to increase interest rates. When that does happen, and the cost of capital goes up from 1-2% for an American VC to maybe 5-6%, I think the valuation they will attribute to new startups in our economy will probably be much lower. So I can foresee that happening, and I think it would probably be a long-drawn problem because inflation doesn't generally turn around right away.
You know, why are you sweating? You're not even VC funded. What are you sweating for?
I was late. I walked.
maybe that's a good thing, right? But that's what I want to take the conversation to. And Vidit Atre, let me come to you now. I think it would perhaps be an overstatement to say that the party is over. It might be over for some. Few, but I think in general, directionally, we are headed towards bigger, better things as far as India's startups are concerned. You know, since the time that you started Misho, and it's been a phenomenal ride for you just in terms of the exponential growth that you have seen. Today, as you take stock of where you are, you've lived through an era of abundance. Now, as you enter an era of constraints and capital not being as easily available as it was, is your business model ready?
First of all, thank you so much, Shereen, for kind of organizing this. Great to be here with such a esteemed panel. I think if you go back, when we started this company in 2015. If you ask me, that was the last time where people were questioning the future of the startup ecosystem. If you remember, lots of companies started, lots of companies died, and we started this business at that point in time. Because to us, it's not about like, hey, is the funding environment good or bad? We started because we believed in a mission. We believe that Indian small business economy should come online and no one else is solving for it, and we want to do it. Now cycles come and go, right? And great companies are built over decades, which means we will see multiple cycles. For the first 2 years, if you look at it, we just did not raise much capital. Like, we were extremely starved of capital, and we continued to build this business, and we are where we are. Then obviously in the last 2 years, things improved quite a lot. All of us had a lot of capital. Last year we raised almost $1 billion. And then like now things have changed again.
One of the freshly minted unicorns.
Yes, and now things have changed again, and we are again changing what needs to be optimized for in the business, right? It's not just about growth now, it's about growth with it's about profitable growth now. You have to keep focusing on profitability. And I believe it's a very, very good thing for the ecosystem, because the longer you do not fix things, the harder it becomes, right? So we go through the stage of first grow and then fix, then grow and then fix. We are in that fixed stage. It will be for a couple of quarters. Most companies will figure it out. Few companies won't be because they're not prepared. And that's the cost of kind of getting through this phase. But I believe like Indian ecosystem, Indian startup ecosystem, 10 years from now is going to be much, much larger. I don't think anything's going to change. So this is just a blip, and it's the right thing, right? Like it's happening for the right reasons. And I believe like some of the companies that will 10 years from now will be the most successful listed on stock exchanges with the company that did the right things at this point in time in 2022.
Well, we'll talk about what those right things are in just a second. But Sachin, I want to address this issue with you. And I think the difference between businesses being started and then being run to chase valuation versus actually addressing a problem and creating value. I think that's what will separate the men from the boys and the girls from the women, so to speak. But at this point in time, given what you have decided to do as far as your own purpose is concerned, from where you started to where you are today, what does the journey look like?
I think for us, Shereen, and again, thank you so much for organizing the panel. It's always been around a mission. And for us, it's around unlocking human potential. Today, unlocking human potential and software are one and the same thing. You cannot really unlock potential, whether it's digital transformation, whether it's small businesses that are trying to come online, entrepreneurs in India that are now trying to build ideas, but there are not enough developers in the world. And so our platform was always around, democratizing that really archaic, people-heavy process and making it so that it was very predictable. And technology was like renting an office or buying a computer or using a mobile phone. And in our own journey, I think what we've always come back to is, are we delivering on the mission? And so as we've gone through the pandemic, I would say for many of us, we went in starving. And so you went in starving, so you knew how to manage. For many of us, we are now going fat, with lots of food in the kitchen, but we have to have a starvation mindset. And so that is all about making sure that the unit economics work. It's really about making sure that you are delivering the customer promise, and it's really simple and that everyone can understand it. And I think the minute you go away from chasing you go to chasing evaluation, I feel like you're doomed before you started. And the big difference between now and March 20th, when the pandemic came out, is that was a cliff. And so it was everyone fell behind the tribe. So you looked at your employees and everyone wanted defensibility. Defensibility was in the group. But now it's a slow recession or a slow inflation in that sense. People don't feel it the same way. I think we're 12 months away before you really see the real impact. But I'd say the bright light in all of this is that people will keep making software. And I think that is a one-way street. It's a gating function. We've passed it. So I'm very positive.
Well, yeah, and there is plenty to be positive about, and there's plenty to be optimistic about as we look forward as well. And yes, these are difficult times, but we've been through not everyone, not many of the startups that have been minted in the last few years haven't seen difficult times, haven't seen inflation at these rates or interest rates moving higher. So it is going to be challenging for them particularly. But Prashant, let me address the issue with you in terms of what you tried to do with Ease My Trip. And I guess you managed to escape the volatility of the market by actually listing ahead of the volatile times.
Yeah, well, we were kind of fortunate to be accepted pretty well by the market. We got listed in March 2021. We did not anticipate COVID wave to arrive just afterwards. On 19th of March, we got listed, and probably around 27th of March onwards, the business started going down because of the COVID wave 2. So yeah, well, but the thing is that we kind of left a lot on the table probably, because of which the market has been pretty kind to what we have been doing. Our results came today.
What made you leave a lot on the table? Because the problem that we've seen with the recent listings, the recent IPOs, and the marquee ones at that is there was nothing left on the table.
See, Shereen, for us, we have the similar journey as Nikhil, Kamath over here. We grew bootstrap for the last 13 years. We kind of fought the battle with our sweat and blood. So at the time of listing, to be honest, we were also not very sure what our valuation would be, because we never had a benchmark. But of course, we had the bankers who were telling us that we should be valued 2x more than what we got listed at. The thought process was that we only have to dilute 25% right now. The remaining 75% will anyways be ours. So why not to make a mark? And especially since we were the early ones, we were one of the first ones to be listed in year 2021, and we knew many were coming. So we wanted to set the right precedence for everybody. We did not want, market to see tech companies to be in the other side. So that was the endeavor which we were planning to do.
And it worked out well for you. But I'll come back to each one of you in just a second. KTR, you have been a champion of startups. We've shot at T-Hub with you. What made you a believer in the startup story? Why did you make it such a focus area for the state of Telangana?
Well, Shereen, I was wondering what question you were going to ask me because, all these superstars here, all unicorns. I'll tell you what, in fact, I'd like to call my state a startup state. We are the youngest state in India. And in fact, I'm a firm believer that my state, in 75 years of independent India, is the most successful startup. In fact, we possibly are a unicorn as well in that sense. So why startups and why innovation? Because I'm a firm believer in the 3I mantra: innovation, infrastructure, inclusive growth. I think that's the key to propel India into the first world orbit. I think that there's no bypassing that. Now, on the innovation piece, a lot of people think innovation is all about technology or disruptions in current business processes. I think innovation could also be about disrupting your policies, in terms of what kind of policy you can come out with for municipal, local bodies. What kind of innovations can you come out with? What kind of disruptions can you come out with for your rural setting? What kind of innovation can you come out with respect to your ease of doing business?
Yeah.
So we focused on innovation not as a piece with respect to startups, but as a culture in our state. And we wanted to be an agile, very progressive state. And when we started our journey 8 years ago, what we had done was initially we started disrupting, of course, on a number of counts in terms of policy, but also, Hyderabad, which was always playing catch up with Bangalore. We decided that the one missing piece, because I know most of these guys are actually located in Bangalore, which kind of puts me off, but nevertheless. So what we decided to, start doing was, build at least the physical infrastructure, start enabling, government playing the role of an enabler to have these young guys come, give them a platform to innovate, etc. And most importantly, I think bring in the culture to start celebrating failure as well, because I think 96% of the startups actually don't take off. So I think we have to bring in the culture of innovation from a young age. We appointed a chief innovation officer. We started a Telangana State Innovation Cell, trying to catch them young at a high school level. I think these are all the efforts that are going to pay off. You'll start seeing more unicorns and more successful startups from Hyderabad as well, and maybe we'll have some of them also set up shop in my state as well.
Nikhil, what I want to address with you is, and I think that's something that Prashant spoke about as well, was there never any temptation to go down the VC route? I mean, you would have been chased down, I would imagine, with offers, with checks. How come you decided to resist that temptation?
When we actually needed the money at the very beginning, I do not think many people were chasing us. And after we turned profitable, we never really had a roadmap of how much we want to grow. It was very organic, and till date, I don't think we've felt the need to grow at an exaggerated pace. The markets tell you what they require, and you kind of evolve around that. So no, I mean, when we needed it, it was not available, and when it was, we probably did not need it.
And profitable growth, that's been the focus area for you. And I think what I have noticed is there's also very constant communication from the team on what you intend to do, why you intend to do it. Setting up that culture of constant communication, of transparency, of decision making, and not chasing growth at any cost. Was that an active decision, or again, did it just fall into place organically?
Well, I would be wrong in taking credit for the culture, because I pretty much focus most of my time on research and investing. But Nitin and the other people on the team, I think the initial team, which was Zerodha, maybe like 10, 12 years ago, a lot of them are still with us, and they are the senior leaders of the organization. These are people we've known growing up. Somebody is a neighbor from an apartment, somebody we used to play cricket with, and nobody has left. And I think culture did not probably evolve particularly in the company, but it's just how the people were. We all got along outside of work, and then we got along at work as well.
Well, so that's a good way of keeping a business going and keeping it fun as well. If you enjoy the people that you work with and you work for. But with it, let me address the issue of growth. And growth at any cost. I mean, if you look at the burn rates across the ecosystem, significant. We have, of course, because of the adoption of technology and through COVID, consumers didn't have a choice, that brought down burn rates across companies. But is this something that worries you? Is this an active conversation that you've had with investors? I mean, how much do you grow and at what cost do you grow? And now you're going to have to rework that model, don't you? You are going to have to turn the clock back on the kind of burn that you were able to swallow and not be able to do the same any longer.
Yeah, I will answer this question, but I think before that, I also want to some extent, explain the types of burn, right? There are two types of burn most companies have as startups. One is discretionary burn. Hey, tomorrow I need to scale it down. I will do it like right away, which is, hey, I'm acquiring newer consumers. I'm investing in marketing, right? These are things that you scale up in a moment and you scale down in a moment. If you have discretionary burn, I feel you can be opportunistic. Capital is available easily. I can see a very clear growth path of getting to the goal that I have. Why not make use of it? Like, why stay conservative when you can really go ahead of everyone else because you compete in the marketplace with large players with a lot of money? The second burn, which by the way is the more dangerous burn that I say, is the non-discretionary burn. And these are generally two types. One is you're burning because you have too many people, right? Second is a burn because your unit economics are negative. Now, these things don't change in a single day. Like, you realize that, hey, market changed, and I have mostly non-discretionary burn, which means if I have to really fix it, it may take 9 months, 12 months, years.
Yeah.
And that, by the way, is risky. I believe not all burn should ever be put in the same category, right? Like, if it's discretionary burn, cost of capital is low, I don't think it's a very bad thing to go out and take advantage of the opportunity. You should basically go out and do it.
That's the argument that people make about debt as well, except that if you take on too much debt, then it becomes a problem, yeah?
Yeah, so I just believe, and now coming back, is I think last year was opportunistic for all of us. Cost of capital is pretty low. Market rewarded growth, right? Market opportunities have become quite large because of the pandemic. I don't think anyone can like say no to that. India's e-commerce penetration even today is 5 to 7%. Western markets, China, like 35% plus. The room for growth is massive. So hey, we can grow like quite a lot. Like, a cost of capital is low. Why don't you do it?
Yeah.
And we always made sure that our burn is always discretionary. You take it up, you take it down whenever you want. But I will say, like, in cases, in the ecosystem, there are lots of cases where the burn is the second one.
The non-discretionary.
That, I believe, is risky, and that's where the board role plays come in, like what you are doing in the early days, the foundation that you set in. And that is also the most painful part of what's going to happen. Like, next 9 months, few companies will change their direction very, very quickly. Yeah. Because they lied in the first bucket. All the pain will come from the second bucket, because there you can't change things. So that's why I would say, like, people use this burn like as a very generic term. I don't think it is.
Okay. Sachin, I want to address the similar sort of issue with you as well in terms of risks, what kind of risks, and risks at what costs.
Right.
And I want you to explain that to us in the context of what you've been able to do. And as you look at the choices that you need to make, what guides you? And with it brought up the aspect of boards. And now what we're seeing, of course, many are doing it pre-IPO because that's part of the requirements. But many are also trying to bring mentors on board, independent directors on board fairly early on. So it's some degree of adult supervision, but it's also just mentorship, and guidance. So what are you doing on both these aspects?
So look, I think, Shereen, for us, and we've got a story that's somewhere between these two gentlemen and my friend sitting here, in that we bootstrapped for the first 4 years. So we raised a $30 million Series A when actually we were in the tens of millions of dollars of revenue already. And it was very important for us to get that right, because we wanted to only raise when we knew someone wanted to buy what we were selling. I think the second then has been, our company culture comes down to 3 words. Be deliberate, be authentic, and be relentless. And in everything we do, we made cost cuts like everyone else during COVID. But we took most of the cost cuts and said, we'll reduce comp and give options. And the byproduct of that was when we raised a round later, those options were sold at a 40% premium, so people benefited. And so there are just, if you are authentic and deliberate, there are ways that you can work around it. And I think, in sort of answering the second part of your question, similarly, when you think about boards and you say adult supervision, I think we're adults already, right? And I'm going to be a bit punchy in this, in saying that a board member's job is to ask cursory questions.
Yeah.
Not to tell you what to do.
Yeah.
And if as a founder you are unable to take the decision of what needs to be done, then you're not really a founder. You're an engineer that is just sitting on a ton of cash and spending non-discretionary burn. But when you think about how you operate the company, you've got to have a very clear sight in plans. For us, 6 months of last year, we were EBITDA positive. And it's because revenue outstripped cost for us. We were behind on hiring, which is great, and not great, but we were so far ahead on revenue. But it goes down to saying, does a unit of your sale make enough money? Are you bringing gross margin back to the business? And getting everyone to have that frugal, slightly starved mindset, because I take people back to, we didn't have a Series A at some point. Yeah. There was COVID at some point. What were you doing then?
Yeah.
And I think the last part is that in that pursuit of growth, I think a lot of founders or CEOs sometimes lose that there's an inside organization that you need to dig into. So I actually do multi-skip level meetings within my team. So I sit with one team a month, and I go down to like, what is the hour by hour we're doing around this? And what it helps me is not for micromanaging. What it helps me is to understand where are we missing, like what's actually stepping in. Because my first job is to operate the company. My second job is to go raise capital.
Yep, that's absolutely right. But Prashant, since we are talking about life-changing events, listing is a life-changing event. You've got, of course, compliance requirements, which are very, very different. My peeve with a lot of startups today is when you ask questions, you don't get answers. And the excuse is, we're not obligated to give you answers. But that's not good enough. So how has that changed life for you, pre-listing to post-listing?
Well, Shereen, pre-listing, I don't think so. We have had many interviews. We were just...
Not you. I wasn't talking about you in specific. I wasn't talking about you in specific.
Well, I have to talk about myself. So, I can only talk about what has happened post-listing. Prior to that, I think probably there were only like 5 articles written about us in 13 years. So, but post-listing, the thing is, yes, there are some compliances which keeps us busy. But I would think that that's minimal compared to the value which you get. At EaseMyTrip, our ticker price is visible to almost 7 crore people who are trading, right? So that's a value which you get. In fact, if you just do Google Trends search, you could see that how the number of searches for our keyword has gone up post being listed. And also, see, prior to being listed, even if people knew that we do not charge convenience fees, many would choose to not to use EaseMyTrip because we never used to market ourselves, right? So why would you give 5,000 rupees to save 300 rupees? Not knowing whether that company is fly by night or not. But by being listed, we have gained that confidence in people. So primarily, I think that there is so much more value which we have gotten by being listed, rather than maybe a day or two compliance work which is required in a quarter's time. So I think overall it has been beneficiary to the company.
Yeah, absolutely. But, KTR, again, going back to the startup state correlation that you made, opportunistic decisions, opportunistic policies, we talked about some of that in the context of them running their business. As a politician, how do you make choices in terms of what works at what time? And sometimes there are trade-offs. How do you weigh which one?
Well, there's a section of the media that calls us the most opportunistic lot on the planet, actually, all the politicians. So, well, Shereen, there is cost of opportunity. I mean, see, let me put it this way. Each of the governments is elected for a finite period of time, 5 years. And as you know, Shereen, the first year for any government goes into basically settling in. And the last year we're fighting an election, so there's essentially 3 years left. So what you choose, what you choose to prioritize, and what you choose to go after in terms of delivery, in terms of being able to call it a success, is something that really depends on your situation. So in our case, when we started our journey in 2014, We didn't have power. We were a power deficit state. We didn't have, the basics. So what we decided was to focus on getting the basics right. So we became a power surplus state in a matter of 4 years. And then we ensured that each and every single home in Telangana is connected, unlike any other state in India, with potable drinking water connection. And we also ensured to build some world-class products, like the world's largest lift irrigation project is in Telangana, and it was done in 4 years flat. So it depends on the priorities, it depends on the cost of opportunity, it depends on how aligned you are with the people's expectations. So, choices.
I want to get a sense of how you see the India story and the growth opportunity, because there's tons of research reports that come out every day forecasting the size of a market and the size of an opportunity. But let me ask you, Nikhil, through the course of the pandemic, what we saw was an influx of new retail investors coming into the market, trying their hand for the very first time. But once again, I've seen plenty of numbers on what the opportunity is for India's fintech space and so on and so forth. What, according to you, is the real opportunity?
Well, Shereen, I think you need to figure out what lens to pick. I could be pessimistic about this and paint one picture. I could be optimistic and paint another.
Which do you feel today?
Depending on who asks me, I change the answer.
Okay, I'm asking you, so what do you feel today?
Well,
He's obviously opportunistic.
Well, the one thing which is certain is, we're here in Davos, and anybody you talk to, any international investor, people are generally very upbeat about India. They're not so upbeat about China. They're not so upbeat about Europe and America. To some extent, I think it's testament to the fact that we've had a stable government, and these regions around us have issues of their own. We've had an ecosystem where an investor who came into India, to a certain extent, knew how policy changes will be in the next decade, and that kind of sense of direction has helped the country
And stability,
tremendously.
yeah.
I think kudos to the incumbent government for having done that. From the perspective of economy alone, I think we have issues, like does the rest of the world. Inflation, I think, is a really big issue for us right now. Our trade deficit seems to be going up. I mean, at $20 billion a month, we will probably run out of a big chunk of our reserves very quickly. Also, I think, like demographic numbers, if fertility rates dropping, an aging population, I think this will change the skew of how we as Indians look at how we predict what will happen to the economy in the future. All that being said, I still think India is probably one of the biggest opportunities in the world today. Not in the least by virtue of the penetration numbers that everybody has been talking about. My industry is probably the least, like 2%, and everywhere else in the world could be as high as 40-50%. I think the GDP per capita really has to go up. For China, that magic number seemed to have been about $4,000-5,000. When we get to that point, I think disposable income goes up significantly. When that happens, people have money to invest, people have money to shop on Meesho, people have money to travel. I think the key is how we get to that point from where we sit today.
Vidit, let me ask you, the kind of growth that you've already seen, and in light of what the market looks like at this point in time, what are you working with? What's the assumption that you're working with in terms of what the opportunity size could be?
Yeah, so I think opportunity size again does not change. Like what we are working toward, the mission 7 years ago, when the market was different, 2 years ago when the market was different, and today is the same. As I said, India has only about 150 million people who transact and buy anything online, which is almost 10% of the population, right? Very, very underpenetrated. And you look at respective category, that number keeps going down. Look on the other side, you look at India, 85% of India's retail is unorganized. Unorganized, unstructured, long tail, via small businesses. Even among some of our peer emerging markets like Latin America, Southeast Asia, India is much more unorganized. You look at the share of small businesses selling online, very, very small, right? So I would suggest just the opportunity size hasn't changed, right? Opportunity size hasn't changed, And it is possibly, like I'm talking about e-commerce because that's the sector we know, globally, the largest e-commerce growth opportunity that exists is India by far. Like number 2 would be like very, very below because we are again very low in penetration and a lot of things have happened that are big tailwinds around this. One is cost of data going down, UPI happening, like lots of things have happened and things will continue to happen. And this is also deflationary, right? Like online channels tend to be more efficient. So when people have inflation, they will tend to move towards more efficient channels rather than convenient channels. So I believe all the tailwinds will make it happen. Now the question is, moment in time, like today, what changes for us? What changes is how, like the things that we optimize the business for, which I was talking about. So today, we assume the worst. Inflation doesn't go away in a few years. So people, like I was hearing someone talk about this in the panel, that takes much longer for the inflation to go away than it took to come in. It took 2 years after some of the things that started it like 2 years ago for the inflation to come in. So I'm assuming the worst and saying it will take a lot more to go away. So the cost of capital is not going to go down for a very long time. So assume that is going to be the capital scenario and build it for it. So we'll assume we have a lot of money in the bank from what we raised last year. We're going to now focus on growing profitably. We have top 3 goals, maybe we have profitability, which is not the case before because we wanted to first capture market share, go larger. So I think that is changing. Like how you do it will change depending on all these things around you. The opportunity, as I said, is the largest in the world and there's no doubt about it.
What's changing for you, Sachin, at this point in time?
So I think we're seeing, one of the questions I ask the team, we do a lot, is we go back to the macro trends under which we built the business. Have they changed? And I think what we're seeing is an acceleration, not a deceleration. So we see the similar tailwinds. Digital transformation is happening. You see a lot in India of build in India, build for yourself, reinvent. And so when we started the business, we said, we believe that traditional digital economies were going to merge. Clearly it's happening and we think it's going to happen now at an unprecedented pace. As you look at the world today, there's a demand for 400 million developers. Guess how many are available? 25 million. One is growing exponentially, one is growing linearly. So the divide is only becoming bigger. The average customer that's driving that demand, whether they're building an application, doing digital transformation, thinking of a new idea, they think Java is a coffee bean you buy at Starbucks. And PowerPoint is the extent of no code. And so when you have 82% failure of people trying to realize an idea, clearly if you reduce that, the TAM only increases. And I'd go as far as saying that if you set up a business bank account, or you get a corporate lease or an office retail space, it's a matter of time before you need to build an application. And so for us, a lot of what we're really trying to drive towards, especially with the India story and why India is almost 50% of our revenue, and we grew 300% last year in GAAP revenue, 6x in run rate. A part of what's really driving that is because the customer really wants to buy it. It's that simple. Like all the numbers mean nothing else. And how do we know the customer really wants to buy it? Well, you look at is your sales efficiency? How quickly can you rotate your discretionary burn? We can rotate it 6 times a year. So our customers, we pay back in 8 weeks, which means in the 9th week I can deploy the same $1 million again, go acquire customers. 9 weeks later I can start again. And so and that really goes down to just this such a latent demand. For us, it's just keeping our heads on the ground, staying really focused and just in execution.
Prashant?
So, Shereen, pretty much that has been our life since last 13 years, to be extremely focused and be as efficient as possible. In fact, what we have seen is there have been eras like this before, which is year 2015. If you guys remember, there was a shortage of cash. And honestly speaking, that was the time when we grew fastest. See, when our 6 competitors have a little bit tough time raising money, their hands are tied behind the back, and that is when we actually throw punches openly. So for us, I am kind of looking forward. Unfortunately, sorry, but I'm looking forward for the next couple of years. And for the last 3 years, we have been almost doubling our profit. So I'm really looking forward to the future. Overall, I think India's market is, I could speak about my industry. There are about 710 airplanes which are used for domestic purposes in India right now. And it is anticipated that in next 2 decades, 2,200 more airplanes will be added in this tally. So imagine in 20 years, this industry is going to be 5 times. And this is India-specific industry because 66 new airports are coming in India. Nowhere in the world you could say that there are going to be 66 new airports going to be added. So we are really looking forward to this and grow along with it.
You know, I want to ask each one of you. We've seen hundreds of startups coming in. We talked about the unicorns as well. Who are you most excited about outside of your own companies? When you look around you, you know, which is the story that excites you the most?
This is actually a tough question.
Give me an honest answer.
You can say Cofluence.
Yeah, oh my God, Cofluence.
Influence.
Yeah, no, Cofluence is in a very early stage right now, but of the unicorns that are around right now, I would say, I'm going to talk about the products that I use.
Sure.
I use
Yeah.
Swiggy a lot. I mean, they might have gone through a lot of trouble, and their competitor Zomato might have, you know, like eroded a part of its market cap and everything. But I use the app, and I love the app. I do not know the guys at Swiggy, so I'm not like recommending anything. But I really cherish my experience on it because it's very efficient to me.
Yeah, and that's a fair point. That's a fair point. With it, who do you look out for? Who do you watch out for? What's the story that excites you?
So I won't pick a company.
Outside of yours.
Yeah, I won't pick a company, but I'll pick a sector,
Okay.
right? Like that I feel very excited about. I feel like building beyond the top 100 million population is going to be the large economy. And that's the large opportunity. I think even today in morning, I think in a panel, DPIT secretary was talking about this, that the number of people in rural areas who essentially have connections has gone up in a single year by 50%. That number for urban areas is like 20%. Right? So the digitization, right now people are getting that basic infrastructure. They're getting those smartphones, they're getting access to data now. Right? Once that happens, applications start to get built.
Yeah.
And that's when the opportunity unlocks. So I believe the time for tourist entrepreneurs is gone. Like people who come for a quick buck is gone, right? Because this is now tough. Like you have to build it over a decade. So I think this is the best time ever for people
For the
who
serious
really,
guys.
Yeah, for people who really believe in a mission, people are passionate about something. Like, yeah, this will keep me excited every single day. I'll work like 20 hours a day on this problem and I'll feel good about it.
Do you work 20 hours a day?
But in the early days we did. Like in the early days, like if you see the first 2 years for us were very tough because we didn't have capital and we had to prove something for us to kind of move forward. I believe this is the time, like yet again, for that to happen. So I believe that is a very large opportunity, very, very good time for serious entrepreneurs to come in. And that's why I'm so optimistic about it. Some people will definitely do it, but at least those tourist entrepreneurs are now gone. Like it's not an easy thing to do.
I like that term, tourist entrepreneurs. Sachin, what are you excited about?
So for me, I think when we look
I mean,
at
you walk down this road and everyone's got Web 3.0 and blockchain and crypto and, you know, I don't know. Are you in the believers camp, the non-believers camp? What excites you? Are you a metaverse fan?
I would probably say I sit on the fence. Which is probably the best answer. But I think no. In all seriousness, I look at some of the investments we've made personally, and you know, I'm really big fan of companies where you can almost see that their product unlocks either someone who couldn't do something before, someone's survival in business, or someone's artistic ability or sports ability. So 3 companies I'm really interested globally. One in India. Josh and Daily Hunt, because I think what they're doing with allowing the creator economy to like resurface and be so relevant, and they're doing it in a really authentic way. I think Umang's a rock star, so I think that's awesome. There's a company called Pipe in the US. They help companies that have SaaS revenue bring their gross margins forward or bring their revenue forward. So that means you defer the need for external cash. Founders have more control. And they can really help you sort of move the needle. And I'm a huge tennis fan. And I think the sport, unfortunately, is not having its heyday because the average age of someone is 65 who watches tennis. So I'm really interested in like this Web3 mixed with tennis leagues and tennis sports that are happening. And you're seeing a lot of sport in Web3 now resurface because it makes it, again, exciting for the players all the way through the life cycle.
Prashant?
Well, for me, I'm actually really, really curious and looking forward to see companies which are going to be building for Bharat like Misho. Well, for the way I see is that India is somewhat like Europe, you know, where the culture, the language, food, everything changes if you move up and down, right? And hence, because of all these nuances, a lot of specific companies should come, which are building just for SMEs, for that matter, which are building just for people who speak Bangla, which are basically built for people from Telangana, you know. So I'm looking forward to see India keep adding the tally of unicorns, the ones who are specific to Bharat. And the second thing, if I were to go all back up again and start my internship somewhere, that company would be Neuralink for me.
Neuralink?
Neuralink for me.
Why?
So for me, it's just so fascinating to think that there could be a future where I can store my thoughts and relive those thoughts. Even the first kiss for that matter.
Oh, that's the thought you want to store, is it?
I hope my wife isn't. But, you know, that's the kind of possibility I think that company is attempting towards. And for me, it's like all over again a bulb moment, like what Thomas said.
What thoughts would you like to store?
What thoughts would I like? Well, definitely sitting with these guys and listening in, because each of them, you know, while, you know, as successful as they are, I think I've gained so much in just listening to them, because I think it's fascinating, the kind of journeys they've been through, the kind of, struggles they've been through, and to be where they are at. But if I have to go back to the question that you asked them, I think I'd pick obviously a Hyderabad startup. I think I'd pick Skyroot, which is a space tech company, and I'd also pick sector-wise. I think mobility is a great sector. I think it's an exciting sector to be in, because with EVs and a bunch of other cool things, you know, happening across the world, I think mobility is a great sector. And space tech again is a very, very interesting sector, which again explores, you know, the gamut.
And it's opening up now.
Absolutely.
I want to end by asking you a little bit of a personal question, and I'll start by asking you, Nikhil. Entrepreneurship is not easy. It's a fairly lonely place to be as well, because you know you're responsible for the decisions that you make. You're the one where the buck stops, and when things don't work out the way that you want them to, you don't really have anyone else to fall back on. Have you experienced that? How do you cope with it when you do feel those moments of loss or loneliness or confusion?
So, I wouldn't totally agree with you. I take like a slightly different view on this. You know, growing up, I used to always look up to so many people, right? I'd read a book about someone. I would look at this great business guy on TV. After having met many of them and after having interacted with people from different realms of life, I think people at the end of the day are not very dissimilar. We're all, I think, similar in many ways. Our situations have kind of like put us wherever on a pedestal, however temporary that might be, but it is what it is today. So I don't think it is lonely, and I don't think somebody who has done well or succeeded is special, and hence he has done it. I think we're all a factor of our circumstance. Like I was telling you about, you know, stability in the government, how India has grown in the last 10, 20 years. We would not exist today if we tried to start exactly what we did 12 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, or today. We were a benefactor of that cycle. So when you take yourself out of the picture and do not think you've achieved something great, I think you stop thinking, you know, what happens if you fail.
Yeah, so don't believe in your own myth and don't take yourself too seriously as well. With it, what about you?
Yeah,
what has been the hardest thing that you've had to go through the course of this journey since 2015?
There have been many. If I kind of talk about all of them, I think it will take the entire evening.
The biggest one.
The biggest one I'll talk about.
Which acted as a turning point for you.
Yeah. So like first couple of years for us as a company were quite tough. Like we started and we, like two 24-year-olds come forward and say, hey, we want to bring all small businesses in India online, and we will change the e-commerce landscape to people who have never worked in retail or e-commerce, right? Like people, it was just weird. So we had to prove it. And we went through like 2 pivots. Multiple times we ran out of money. So we started to take some gig projects so we can collect some revenue so we can pay salaries for that particular month. Right? So it's all about survival every single time. And I would remember those 6 months. Like I would get up all night and I sometimes feel very optimistic, hey, we're going to kick ass and this will happen, that will happen. And another night I'll get up and say like everything is going to go bad. Like for how long can we keep surviving? Like we have to get to the next step. And I would suggest that if I was alone in this journey, I would have given up long ago, winded up the startup, and I would be doing a job somewhere. And that's why like co-founders matter so much. Because I had Sanjeev on my side, like every single time I went through a dark patch, he was there to lift me up and say, hey, doesn't matter. Like everyone goes through this, we have to get through this. Like you have to have the patience, the perseverance to get through those phases. And once you get through it, you realize, like I think now after 7 years of this, every single time a bad patch comes, I know that a bad patch is always followed by a good patch. You just have to survive long enough to see it, right? Like you have to survive long enough to see the opportunity come your way.
Yeah.
So I think things have changed. But without co-founders, I think this journey is like anyway it's so lonely. Like without co-founders, like super tough. Like I would have given up 110% long ago if it was just me.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I agree with what you said as well. Sachin, what about you?
So for me, I think it comes down to three things. So I think one is absolutely co-founder. My best friend is my co-founder, and we've been best friends since first year of engineering school. And we're like a yin and yang. So if he's in a good day, it's usually my bad day, and vice versa. I'd say it's family, because that gives you routing. God knows how many times at 2 a.m. my wife has to, the round's going to happen, right? They're not going to do anything wrong, right? It's going to be okay. She's like, it'll be fine, it'll be fine. And I think the third is actually sport. So I play a lot of tennis. I played competitive as a kid. And being a founder and being a singles tennis player actually are both very lonely. One, you have no one to talk to. On a tennis court, you can't talk to the other player. You can only talk to your head. And what you find is, trying to stay stable, sane is actually the hardest thing to do. And I found this probably the most when we had to have that horrible town hall around COVID. And, you know, telling folks that, hey, we're going to have to do a reduction in comp. And I know that options aren't going to put food on the table. And I know that options aren't going to cover your roof or pay for the rent. I must have cried 7 times through that town hall. And the only thing that got me through was something my tennis coach said to me. He said, Sachin, only control what you can control.
Yeah.
You can control now. So in tennis, you can control bringing the racket to the center. You can control doing a split step. That's the only thing you can control. You can't control winning, because there's 2 people playing a game.
Yeah.
And similarly, to me, the only thing you can control is to be authentic. And go into every morning saying, this is what I'm going to do today, and I'm going to do it with 100% energy.
Prashant?
Well, it certainly sucks to be the last one, because they all have covered everything which I wanted to say. But, you know, I kind of agree with everybody. You know, at the first thing, you know, definitely you should not take yourself too seriously, because hindsight is 20/20. But a lot of things happened because we were just at the right time, at the right place. You know, we didn't know that changing from B2B to consumer model would have paved a way for the IPO. It just was natural progression at that time for us. So yes, at that level, if you think that, you know, you are doing what you're probably supposed to do, and it's just a natural thing, then, you know, the loneliness kind of goes away from there on the downsides. But on the other sides, as Vidit says, that it's a sine curve, you know. One day you're like so exuberant, and the other way you just want to die. So the days when the days when you are feeling tough, when your competitors have raised $200 million, and it's all over the newspaper, and you're wondering why would anybody buy from you tomorrow, since there's going to be flat 2,000 rupees off on every flight. So, you know, you just have to keep the sanity prevail and think that, okay, fine, you know, one day this will also change. So, you know, and of course having co-founders, we are brothers who are running the company, so it definitely helps keeping each other, you know, sane all the time.
Well, you know, thank you so much for sharing your stories, but I want to ask you as well. You know, politics...
I was dreading this question, yeah.
Politics can be a lonely place as well. I mean, not in terms of the number of people that you meet, but, you know, what are the thoughts that you have to sort of shut down in your head every night?
Lots of them. You know what, the biggest challenge, I think, in politics is twofold. One, of course, you know, I mean, I might sound really bad saying this, but I'll say it. You have to deal with a lot of mediocrity. I think I might sound a bit pompous and cocky, but it is a fact that day in, day out, you have to deal with lots of it, and you have to pretend like it doesn't affect you. It does. The second thing I'd say is a lot of times, you know, you think you've done good work, but then the people may not agree. So that again is a huge, that alignment that I just spoke about kind of is a huge put off. See, for instance, I'm in Davos, I think I'm promoting my state, I'm doing my job. But then somebody else, you know, tweets and tells me that you're enjoying, you know, your holiday in Davos on the exchequer's money, that sort of thing. It is hugely upsetting at that point in time, but I think you have to take it in your stride and, you know, one day at a time. I think that's the philosophy. Don't think ahead of yourself. and don't think and fixate too much on the outcome in the next election. Just focus on the next day, get the next ball, as they say in cricket, and keep moving. That's it.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today. I think there's been plenty of lessons that each one of you has shared from your own personal experiences, as well as what we are seeing happen around us. And again, I go back to the point that I made at the start of the show. When I started Young Turks 20 years ago, nobody was talking about startups in India. No one gave startups any amount of airtime, let alone headlines. And for me, it became a passion project because I believed that we could do it, we could get there, and I'm so glad that 20 years on, we're here talking to 24-year-olds who are willing to take on the Amazons of the world, you know, each one of you.
Not me.
So congratulations to each one of you, and I wish you the very best of luck, and I hope whatever needs to be fixed is fixed, and you get down to building stable, sustainable, profitable businesses, and businesses that do good not just for you and your customers, but for your communities as well. Appreciate your time. Thank you very much, KTR, for joining us here. Well, with that, it is time for us to wrap up this special conversation here in Davos. From all of us here, goodbye. Many thanks for watching.